Hi, everybody. Good evening. We are here again for one more meeting. And Anahy, please, you're the host today.
Okay, thank you, Mariana. So, hi, everybody. I'll just start share my screen with you. Can you all see?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so today's something that everybody likes to know a little more about. We are going to talk about dreams. Okay. So we all know this guy here, Dr. Freud, Sigmund Freud, and his book in the 1900s, The Interpretation of Dreams, okay? That was like a breakthrough about the unconscious and about dreams. So with the publication of his most famous book, The Interpretation of Dreams in 1900, Freud gives the study of dreams a scientific dimension, paving the way for the exploration of the unconscious. From there, he constructs a first model of the psych apparatus, the topological theory we call in psychoanalysis, where topos, places, correspond to instances of the unconscious, preconscious, and conscious. So most people know that, but I think a little history and you know, it's very important for us to give credit to these great thinkers. So the dream starts to be conceived as a paradigm of a normal functioning of the mind, and at the same time as a psychopathological expression. This is because it would present an equivalence between its structure and that of the neuroses, since its basic function for Freud would be the gratification of repressed desires. So for him, therefore, the dream is a psychological mechanism that works to preserve sleep, expressing and thus discharging unacceptable unconscious desires in a disguised way, that is, through symbols. Its function would be to gratify repressed desires. I know that most people are aware of the Freudian view, but I think it's very important so we can, you know, see a coherence between the development of Freud's thoughts about dreams and then Jung's thoughts. So here's some images of dreams. And then we have the dreams for analytical psychology. So we have this book recommended to everyone that it's in this course, Man and His Symbol. And that's Jung by the river in his house. And we have already seen this wonderful sentence that it's in the beginning of Memory, Dreams, Reflections, Jung's autobiography. My life is a story of the self-realization of the unconscious. But I brought to you again so that we can start thinking in the way that Freud thought about the unconscious, okay, with a lot of repressed desires and a kind of pathological, okay, and Jung's thought about the unconscious. Because see, in this sentence, my life is a story of the self-realization of the unconscious. So the unconscious cannot be pathological, right? Because then Jung would be that, wouldn't be talking about us expressing our pathology, our neuroses and conflicts in the world, and letting them realize themselves or self-realize them in the world. And it's totally different. What we already know what he meant by that, right? About the unconscious and about the self, especially. We are going to be talking more about that. But I just brought the sentence again so we can understand the way that Jung was thinking about dreams and the unconscious. So let's see analytical psychology. So dream interpretation is the cornerstone of Jungian psychology and analytical technique. And it is also one of the most influential contributions that Jung made to the thinking and technique of modern psychology. In Jung's view, the psyche is both a natural and purposeful teleological phenomenon, and he sees dreams in the same way as natural and purposeful, the spontaneous and undisguised expressions of unconscious process. So in this sense, it's totally opposite of what Freud was saying. The disguise through symbols of the contents of the dream to preserve the sleep and to fulfill repressed desires. Jung says no, okay? The psyche is both a natural and purposeful teleological phenomenon, and dreams are the same, natural and purposeful, the spontaneous and undisguised expressions of unconscious processes. So according to Jung, Freud made a mistake in supposing that the reason for our frequent difficulty in fully unveiling the dream's meaning was the imposition of a disguise by some supposed dream censor. For Jung, the difficulties we have in interpreting dreams are due to their unconscious nature. Dreams do not express themselves in the verbal or logical language of conscious life, but find their voice in a quite different language, the language of symbolism. Therefore, to understand dreams, it is necessary to learn to speak this language, the language of the unconscious, with its rich symbols and archetypal images. For Jung, then let's talk a little about symbols, okay? In Jung's psychology. So for Jung, the symbols would be the best possible representation of something that can never be known fully. And he was dedicated to creating in his patients the ability to reflect and live life on a symbolic rather than a simply literal level. So let's see why this is so important, to live life on a symbolic rather than a simply literal level. And I just wanted you to think how far in these times that we live in, that okay, there are a lot of people like developing their own spirituality, as we are trying here in this group and groups like this one. But it's a paradox because we are also have at the same time a lot of materialism. And with materialism, we are living life in a concrete way, far, very far from a life as Jung was trying to develop in his patients, this ability to reflect and live life on a symbolic rather than a simply literal level. So I think this is very important for us to think about. So in Jung's words, we call a symbol a concept, a figure, or a name that can be known to us in itself, but whose content, use, or usefulness are specific or strange, indicating a hidden, obscure, and unknown meaning. So a hidden, obscure, and unknown meaning. Okay, let's see why. So Jung says a concept or a figure is symbolic when it means more than it indicates or expresses. Okay? They have an all-encompassing, unconscious aspect that is never exhausted or precisely defined. As there are many things that are beyond human comprehension, we often use consciously or unconsciously symbolic concepts and figures when dealing with them. We not only use symbols, but we also spontaneously produce them in our dreams. Remember that we talk about the self, when we talk about the self, about the depths of the unconscious, and let's say the wisdom, okay, and the purpose that the self have. And we are talking also about Joanna de Angelis and the Spiritist psychology that we are going, this meeting, I'm going to take some time to say that this meeting is going to be 2 meetings about dreams, okay? So in the first, we're going to see Jung, and Professor Corbett will give us more examples. And in the second, we are going to see what Joanna and the Spiritist psychology have to say about dreams, okay? So, but this is very important because we are talking here, Jung is talking about things that are beyond human comprehension, beyond our daily comprehension in this life of duality that we live, beyond the comprehension of our egos, right? So Jung is saying that we often use consciously or unconsciously symbolic concepts and figures when dealing with them. So we not only use symbols, but we also spontaneously produce them in our dreams. Okay, so let's see a little more about that. So we know that they are, remember when Professor Corbett talked about the iceberg and the depths of the psyche? So they are the symbols, the manifestations of the archetypes in this world, the concrete, detailed, and experiential images that express archetypal constellations of meaning and emotions. I have asked Professor Lionel Corbett to talk a little, to give us an example that he has in his beautiful book, Psyche and the Sacred, Spirituality Beyond Religion, but I don't want to give you spoilers, okay? So we are going to see that after this PowerPoint. So I brought to you some archetypal images that are often in dreams. For instance, going up a stair and having a portal, a door, you know, so the ascension. So of course we have the birth of Venus by Botticelli, the Renaissance movement in Italy in the 15th and 16th century, and all the symbolism of spring, of rebirth, renewal. And we have, for instance, the king, the warrior, the king, with all the archetypal subject issues about order, integrity of the masculine, and so on. And we have the spiral, okay, that with all this archetypal meaning of an ascendant and progressive movement towards evolution, for instance, and only some of the images that can appear in our dreams. But symbols are not identical to the archetypes they represent. Although the rod, the phallus, the number 3, and the image of Yahweh can all be symbolic of the masculine archetype, for example, the masculine archetype stands apart from these representations. The archetype is the psychic mode of the experience, while the symbol is its peculiar manifestation. So the symbol is essentially what makes us human and represents our ability to conceive that which is beyond our understanding, our ability to transcend our conscious state and be in relationship with another superordinate reality. Remember the ice bag. We are diving deep, deep, okay, in this ocean of the transpersonal. So as expressions of the unknown and perhaps the unknowable, symbols constitute the language of the unconscious, of that which is by definition unknown and perhaps unknowable. So examples of how the unconscious speaks through symbols can be found both in dreams with their condensed, mutant, multi-level symbolic images, and in children's games, for example, a highly symbolic activity carried out by human beings not fully aware of their personalities. Because the unconscious expresses itself symbolically, Jung spent a lot of time researching and explaining symbols that had an archetypal and culturally transformative effect. His idea was that this broader and more subtle understanding could make unconscious material as conscious as possible, and thus ward off psychological dangerous situations of one-sidedness or ignorance. So now we are understanding a little better that what was Jung saying. Let's go back a little. Because the unconscious expresses itself symbolically. So the unconscious is talking to, let's say, consciousness. One of the forms is through dreams and the symbols in the dreams, okay? So Jung himself spent a lot of time researching and explaining symbols that had an archetypal and culturally transformative effect. And I want to say to the person that made that very good question, to think about of what we are saying, and just give us some time, because we still have a meeting about myths and archetypes that I want to go back to your question, okay? So his idea was that this broader and more subtle understanding, so Jung's talking about an expansion of, we can think of, expansion of our consciousness, as Joanna de Angelis talk about in all her books, okay? So his idea that this broader and more subtle understanding could make unconscious material as conscious as possible in this life, okay, in this experience that we are living, and thus ward off psychologically dangerous situations of one-sidedness or ignorance. And I don't want to take Lionel's time, but he can give an example. For instance, we read a lot of examples in Jung's works where this one-sidedness or ignorance of consciousness. And for instance, if a person doesn't pay attention of his, her dreams, it could be even dangerous for the person itself. And, you know, even life-threatening sometimes. I was thinking about that guy, Lionel, that had the dream where he goes up a hill, and he talks about this with Jung. And then when he gets in the top of the hill, he just like flies away. But I'm not going to talk about this now. I'll leave it to you. So since the symbol indicates something beyond understanding, to experience life symbolically is to come closer to the individual sense of who we are and what we do, the goal of Jung's analytical work. You see how important it is, and why we in Jungian analysis, the analysts, we pay a lot of attention to our patients' dreams, okay? Because we are talking, when we talk about this, to live life symbolically, so we are doing what Jung was saying, to come closer to the individual sense of who we truly are and what we are really doing here in this life. So it's all about what we came to do and learn in this life. So just start making connections with everything that we have talked about in our meetings, about what is the purpose of this life, of this reincarnation, what are we doing here, what are we are supposed to be learning, right, and experiencing, that Joanna de Angelis calls our attention the whole time, okay? And Jung is saying in his analytical work that it's very, very important to come as much closer as we can to this sense of who we are. And so consequently, what we are doing, really doing, not what we are thinking we are doing with our personas, and we are, you know, all this effort to adapt in this world, but what we are really doing, okay? So that's in Jung's words, the development and expansion of consciousness is a slow and painful process that took countless eons to reach the level of civilization that we place more or less randomly at the time of the discovery of writing around 4,000 before Christ. Although our development since then seems considerable, it is far from perfection. Don't we know that, people? So Jung goes on saying, our psyche is a part of nature, and its mystery is equally unfathomable. We cannot define nature and psyche. We can only ascertain what we currently understand by them. So the revelation of this mystery that is nature and psyche is always going on, okay? So it very quickly, because we just want to know some concepts and thoughts for our own self-discovery purposes, okay? So in the interpretation of dreams in analytical psychology, we have this kind of thoughts. So when we are thinking about everything that Jung says, that direct us in the when we are going to explore dreams with our patients, that a dream compensates for the position or attitude of consciousness, okay? A dream reveals the current situation in the unconscious at the time of the dream. That a dream brings a message from the unconscious to the conscious. Often, it presents a question, a purpose, or a statement. A dream also describes the interaction of the dreamer's complexes. So all these tasks, let's say, we can think of when we are thinking of dreams and their purpose. So in Jung's words, dreams and their illustrative images, subject to many interpretations, all they form, on the one hand, to archetypes, and on the other hand, to repressed contents. Okay, both aspects we can find in the dream, the archetypes and the repressed contents. Therefore, they have two aspects and give rise to two modes of interpretation. One can place emphasis on the archetypal aspect or on the personal aspect, okay? The first indicates the global and healthy basis of instincts, while the other shows the pathological influence of repression and infantile desires. And we are going to be also listening to what Professor Corbett has to say about that. And also we use big dreams and small dreams, but he will tell us more about that, okay? So dreams and the search for meaning, when we are thinking about connecting the two, we can say that dream images also have an inherited energy that makes dream symbols have a transcendent effect outside the here and now. The experience of meaning depends on the awareness of this instance of psychic reality, this transcendence, which complements the empirical reality of life, both forming together a totality. Remember when we saw the psychic structure according to Jung, that we have the complexes in the personal unconscious, and going deeper in the direction, let's say, of the collective unconscious, of the transcendent level, dimension of the psyche, we have so in the nucleus, we could say, of the complex, the archetypes, okay? So that accounts for the experience of meaning depending on the awareness of this instance of psychic reality, this transcendence, which complements the empirical reality of life, both forming together a totality. So we can conclude that the unconscious exists to expand consciousness. So it's not, you know, just a place where we have repressed and contents and everything that the ego doesn't want to get in contact with. It has purpose, it has wisdom, it knows where the whole psyche should be going, in direction of what the whole psyche should be going, okay? It carries out this work using the suggestion of symbols. Symbols fascinate consciousness so that it flows toward the new potentials, channels of experience and therefore development. And then I brought again that beautiful sentence by Jung: your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. He didn't say your own mind, he said your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, looks inside, right? Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. And I brought this beautiful sentence by Plato. we can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of light. So with that, I will stop sharing and we can see what Professor Corbett can tell us about his vision and Jung's vision of dreams. Lionel, with you. Lionel, your microphone. Your microphone. Okay.
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry. I was saying that Anahy's PowerPoint was so comprehensive, it's hard to find anything to add. So just a few points. One is that the dream can do one of two things. It can, if your conscious personality is too one-sided, if you're leaning in too biased a direction, the dream can bring up some idea or some material that compensates for your one-sidedness. It can say, well, that's what you're thinking is not quite right because you should consider this aspect. Or sometimes the dream can complement the situation, complement your personal understanding. It can kind of underline it by saying you're right, but you're not giving enough importance to what you think. So dream interpretation is best thought of, I think, like trying to interpret a foreign language or a very difficult poem that that's using very unfamiliar language to you. You remember, Anna, you said that it's a mistake to think that the dream is disguising something. Well, a foreign language isn't trying to disguise anything. It's just that you don't know how to interpret it. So that's the proper attitude. And you always have to approach a dream with humility, without imagining that you really know what you're going to find. And when there's a symbol in the dream, for example, people very commonly dream about the ocean. It's very easy to think that the symbol, like an ocean, just means one thing. For example, typically people say that it means the depth of the psyche or the deep or the unknown. But that's a mistake. If you approach the symbols with humility, you're never quite, the symbol never means just one thing. That there is a tendency to think that we know what particular symbols mean in advance. So, for example, a bird in a dream is always thought to represent the capacity to ascend to the spiritual dimension, or to be a messenger, like the dove of the Holy Spirit, between the spiritual dimension and the human level. So there I already have a preconceived idea of what the dream symbol of the bird means. But that really is a mistake, because symbols have more than one meaning. So it's important to get rid of those kind of prejudices before we try to understand the dream. Remember that the idea of the symbol is that it's the best possible expression of something which is really a mystery. It's really something unknown. It's like if you think of the cross, the Christian cross. That's a mystery. You can talk about it for a little bit, but then you get to a point where you know that there's more to it, but you can't say anymore. So true symbols are not the same as signs. A sign just means one thing. If you went to the train station and you saw a man with a cap, with a badge on his cap, and the badge was the sign, it would just mean I work for the railroad. Then that sign just has one meaning, but a true symbol is never that straightforward. It has many, many levels of meaning. So the cross would mean the relationship between God and humanity, between time and eternity, between death and resurrection, and so on and so on. But it's much deeper than just saying this sign on that building means it's a church. The symbol is deeply mysterious, that it has many levels of meaning, and that's true for all dream symbols. But the idea is that every dream has a meaning. The meaning is often very obscure. I've worked on many dreams, and very often I find that I understand large sections of the dream, but there's always one mysterious element in the dream that I've just been constantly unable to understand, which is a limitation, I think, of our human intellect. A few more important Jungian ideas. One is what's called the importance of the initial dream. The initial dream is the first dream that the person brings into psychotherapy. The patient will bring into psychotherapy, because very often the first dream, the initial dream, will tell the therapist something about what's going to happen in the therapy. It's as if the dream is what we call a prospective dream or a prophetic dream, meaning it's telling you what's going to unfold. So an example of that is that I saw somebody for the first time, a man, and then I had a dream, or he had a dream in which he and I were walking up a hillside, and we had to walk very gently, because if we pressed our full weight on the grass would smolder and would burst into flame. So that was the initial dream. So it was telling me that I had to walk very lightly, tread very lightly, because if I pressed too hard emotionally, there would be emotional burning or explosion. So that's a good example of the importance of the initial dream. So we always pay a lot of attention to that. Next, the setting of the dream is very, very important. So, for example, it's very common to have a dream that takes place in a kitchen. And the things that take place in the kitchen are very different than the things that take place in the bedroom. So that's what I mean by the setting, the place where the dream is occurring. And so, for example, in a kitchen is a place where we take something raw and we cook it and we make it edible. So the kitchen dreams are about the unconscious trying to make something assimilable, manageable, that we can then ingest, that otherwise would be raw. They often say that the geography of the dream corresponds to the geography of the dreamer's mind. So, for example, if you dream that you're in the desert, where everything is dry and there doesn't seem to be much growing and there's no moisture, no water, that would correspond to a place in the dreamer's mind that's very dry and desert-like. The dreamer's in an emotional desert. So we always have to look for the setting of the dream, the place where it's occurring. Tells us a great deal. And everything in the dream, no matter how fine is the detail, is very important. If a person dreams, I'm driving a car, that's not enough, because we have to ask, well, is it your car? Is it a car you used to have? Is it your parents' car? Is it a car you've never driven before? All those details might be very significant, because if you're driving, first of all, driving a car often is symbolic of how you drive yourself through life, how you push yourself through life. And sometimes if you're driving your parents' car, it means that somehow you're doing it in a way that they used to get through life, or something like that. Or if it's a car that you used to have 20 years ago, it may mean that you're driving yourself now in a way that's similar to the way you did 20 years ago. So those kind of details are very important. The color of the car is important. A red car is going to be associated with passion or excitement, whereas a green car might be associated with growth, new growth, or something like that. So it's never important just to say, I'm driving a car. We need to know what kind of car. And it's important to know whether the dreamer is in the driving seat or being driven, because people sometimes dream that they're being driven by somebody else. And then you need to know, who is it that's driving you, or what is it in you that's driving you? So those details are very important, no matter how unimportant they are. Another important point is that when you dream of somebody you know, it's very common to dream of a relative or a husband or wife or a sibling, someone you know quite well, or a friend. There are two ways of looking at a figure like that in the dream. One way is to say, well, the unconscious is telling me something about the actual person. It's describing how the person is behaving from the point of view of the unconscious. That's called the objective level of understanding. But there's also what's called a subjective level in the dream, where you can take a figure in the dream and ask, what is that person like? What qualities does that person have? And then you realize that the dream really is about the dreamer. It's about those qualities that are really in the dreamer, but the dreamer is projecting them onto this dream figure. So if somebody dreams about somebody and I say, well, what's this person like that you dreamt of? And you say, oh, he's a very good writer. Then it may be that the dreamer is a very good writer, but he's not owning that. He's not acknowledging his ability. He's projecting that onto this dream figure. So figures in dreams can carry positive or negative, what we call shadow projections. In other words, you might dream of somebody who has some talent or ability that the dreamer actually has, but they're not owning it. They're projecting it onto the other person. Or it may be that let's say you dream of somebody and I say, what's this person like? And it turns out this person is very envious. Well, there could be a streak of envy in the dreamer, which the dreamer's not acknowledging. He's projecting it onto this dream figure. So it's very important to look at the qualities of the figures in the dream and not just assume that they're talking about that figure as they are in life. They may be talking about something about the dreamer. Now, another important aspect of this work is try to use all four functions. I don't know whether we've talked about Jung's typology. Have we talked about Jung's? Oh,
not yet. No,
not yet. Oh, okay. Well, basically, Jung divided psychological functions into four. It's kind of a long story, but basically there's a thinking function, a feeling function, an intuitive function, and a sensation function. And it's important to use all four of them. So the sensation function means pay attention to all the fine details. The thinking function is a function of logic. So it's important to apply logic to the dream. The feeling function, having to do with emotions, means don't forget to ask about the emotional level of the dream. And the intuitive function is a way of knowing through the unconscious without necessarily having all the actual facts in front of you. You can still have an intuition. So sometimes using your intuitive function, you can get an idea of what the dream means. The point about this is that we all have a preference for one of those functions. So sometimes we forget to use the others. Now, let's see, what else can I say about this? Another important aspect of dream work is what's called the dream series. And what that refers to is the fact that sometimes we can have a series of dreams with the same theme, although the content changes a little bit over time. For example, you might have a dream that you're being chased. And in the dream, you know you're being chased, something dangerous behind you. And you're very frightened. You don't want to look round. And then a year later, you have another dream that you're being chased. But this time you're able to look round and you see that you're being chased by a bear. And then a few years later, you have another dream in which you're being chased. And this time you look round and it turns out your mother's chasing you. Well, that would be an example of a dream series in which the same theme just evolves over time. And they're not sequential, you know, there may be many dreams in between, but it's very useful to look for the same theme when you work with this kind of material. The next important principle is to get the dreamer's associations to the dream. Okay, so just to use the example of the car, if somebody says, I'm driving a car in the dream, the first important question is, well, what do you associate with cars? Because you don't know. The dreamer might say, I love cars, or the dreamer might say, I hate cars. Or the dreamer might say, well, cars are important to me because my father gave me a car as a present. Or the dreamers, the cars are important to me because so-and-so died in a car crash, or something like that, that the therapist would know nothing about, or the dream interpreter would know nothing about. So that's why the dreamer's personal associations are very important in trying to understand the meaning of the dream. So the same symbol, like a car or a bird or something, could have completely different meanings to different dreamers because they have different associations in different dreamers' life. And then, so first of all, we get what are called these personal associations. And then the move that Jung makes, which other people don't do in different schools of thought, is what's called amplification. And amplification means that you look at a theme in the dream, and you find that this image in the dream has been used in world mythologies or in world religions. So something is being talked about in the individual's dream that actually applies throughout human history. It's part of the collective psyche of humanity. So, for example, suppose somebody dreams of honey. Now, that sounds simple enough. You'd think, if I said to you, what does honey mean? What associations do you have to honey? You would say sweetness or bees or something like that. But if you amplify the dream, the image of honey or the symbol of honey, it turns out that honey has all kinds of important archetypal meanings. It represents nature's capacity for transformation. For example, so the bee takes in pollen from a flower and converts it into this wonderful food. So for many thousands of years, honey and bees have been associated with the transformative power of the divine feminine. Just, you know, a mother takes in food and transforms it into breast milk. So that's another example of the transformative power of the feminine. So that honey could have that kind of association mythologically in the religions of antiquity, in the religions of the goddess, when the girls were being initiated to become priestesses of the goddess, to symbolize this transformative power of the divine feminine, they always used honey as a sort of initiatory meal, because it had that tremendous symbolic meaning. Well, that's an example of what Jung means by amplification, mythological amplification. And that technique is very unique to the Jungian school of thought. The other schools of thought don't do that, but it's very useful sometimes. It's not always useful, because sometimes therapists use amplifications to show off, and it's not necessary, and it's not always relevant to the dreamer, but within limits and used carefully, what it can do is you can locate your own material in the collective stories of humanity, and you can locate the collective stories of humanity in your own psychology, which links you to the rest of humanity. So it can be very useful to do that kind of amplification. And he asked me to give one example of that. I'll come to that in a minute. I just want to warn about amplification, because, for example, suppose you dream about a snake. And I say to the dreamer, dreams about snakes are very common. And I say to the dreamer, well, what are your associations to snakes? What do snakes mean to you? And the dreamer might say, well, they're dangerous. I'm frightened of snakes, and so on and so on. We would all say that kind of thing. And then the dreamer might say, well, I'm thinking of the snake in the Garden of Eden. It's a symbol of evil, or something like that. So, but the problem is, after a few associations like that, one would probably stop being able to think of more meanings. But when you amplify the symbol of the snake mythologically, it has a large number of meanings. So, for example, the snake, because it sheds its skin, it's a symbol of renewal, of regeneration, and it can be, and for that reason it can be a symbol of healing, which is why there's a snake on the caduceus, the symbol of the medical profession. And you know, snake venom in very diluted amounts is used in homeopathic medicine. So it has that connotation on the one hand of being dangerous and potentially evil, and the temptation of the Garden of Eden, but on the other hand, the potential for healing and regeneration and renewal. It was an ancient symbol of the goddess in the ancient goddess religions of the Minoan civilization. Because it was an earth animal and that it was associated with the goddess. So in other words, these symbols are very complex. Now, if you're a Freudian, of course, and somebody has a dream about a snake, it just has one meaning. It's obviously a phallus, a penis, because it just happens to look like one. But that's, you see, from a Jungian point of view, is a great oversimplification. I remember being at a conference some years ago where we were talking about dreams with a group of Freudians, and there was a woman presented a dream in which she's frying fish in a frying pan, and she flips the frying pan. No, sorry, I got it the wrong way around. She's fishing in a river, and when she catches the fish, she flips the fish upward and over her head, and it lands in a frying pan. And all the Freudians in the audience got very excited and said, well, a fish is shaped like a penis and a frying pan is a container. So this is obviously a disguised way of talking about sexual intercourse. You remember that's how Anahy began, with that traditional Freudian interpretation. It's just a disguised way of talking about that. But the Jungians would find that symbol far more complicated, because if you look at the symbol of the fish in world mythology, it's much more complicated. For example, in Christianity, fish were used as a sacramental meal. When the early Christians were in the catacombs, the mass consisted of fish. It was a fish meal. The Greek word ichthyos, meaning fish, they used as an acronym for Jesus Christos hui soter theos, meaning Jesus Christ, Son of God. So they associated the fish with Jesus Christ, and he said, I'll make you fishers of men, and so on. So that's just a quick mythological amplification. It's much more complicated than just saying the fish has this shape, so it just has this one meaning. Another meaning of the fish is a content of the psyche that can go down into the depth and become invisible, or it can come up and become visible. And we all have contents in us that can go up and down like that, and so on. And then the fish has lots of eggs, so the fish can be a symbol of fertility. And well, there are probably more amplifications. My point is that there isn't just one meaning to a symbol like the fish. And it's very important not to oversimplify the meaning of a symbol like a fish. Similarly, animals are very common in dreams. And animals always have qualities. Different animals have different qualities. So very commonly, people dream about dogs. And then you would say to the person, well, what do dogs mean to you? How do you feel about dogs? And the person would say, well, dogs are, our best friend. They're symbols of loyalty. relationship, connection, something like that. That would be one person's association. And then you would say, okay, so the dog in this person's dream it represents the instinctual level, the pre-human level of all those qualities. But another person might say, well, I'm terrified of dogs because when I was a child, I was bitten by a dog or something like that. So in other words, the dog never has, or the animal in the dream never has one meaning. One always has to be very careful to get the dreamer's associations. But animal dreams are very common, and it's important when you work with them to try to understand the particular quality of the animal. And then next, we like to what we call dream the dream onwards. What that means is you have a dream image, and then there are various ways of doing this. It's called active imagination. You imagine the dream in your mind's eye, and then you somehow continue the dream in your imagination. You can do that just by thinking about the dream and watching it as if it was a movie in your mind, and you just watch how the drama unfolds in your mind. Or you can paint the dream. Very commonly, if the person is able to paint, they will paint the dream image. And as they're painting, they get ideas about it. And that's a way of getting into an ongoing relationship with the dream. Or Jungians are very fond of doing sand play, which is a box of sand about that wide and that deep, and they have lots of figures, and you can reenact the dream in the sand using these figures off the shelf, and then you can continue to build a story in the sand. It's very useful. You know, if you can do it all kinds of ways. If you have a dream of a dog, you can take the dog for a walk in your imagination and talk to the dog and ask the dog how it's feeling and so on. I mean, this is imaginal, it's not literal, but sometimes you can get very important information by continuing the dream in your imagination. Well, that's all I can think of for the moment. Do you want me to talk about that dream you mentioned, or have we had enough? Anahy, where are you?
I think it would be great if you could talk a little bit about that dream.
Okay, all right. I did find the dream. Anahy asked me to talk about a dream. So I'll tell you the dream. I follow a young girl to an old adobe house in a village nearby. When we enter the house, the front room is softly lighted and its walls are bare. Suddenly, the girl is suspended on the wall like a crucifix. I'm shaken. And then her body starts to come apart, and her separated arms and limbs and head and torso are rotating on the wall. And then she comes back together again, and she's standing beside me. So that's a very unusual dream in which the figure of this young girl comes completely apart and then comes back together again. Now, obviously, that's a symbol. It's not a literal occurrence. It's a symbol of what's called the archetype of dismemberment. Okay, and if you look in world mythology, you find that dismemberment is an archetypal theme that's found very typically in shamanic traditions. When shamans are being initiated and they have shamanic experiences while they're drumming, they go on a shamanic journey, it's very common for them to have this kind of dismemberment experience. And obviously what it means is that symbolically, that the personality is being taken apart and then reconstituted in a more complete way, or in a better way. So in other words, this dream says there's a radical reorganization of the personality, a transformation is going on in the dreamer. And so it's an archetypal image, which I think is linking him to a kind of shamanic potential, which he may not have realized that he had. Okay, it's as if the dreamer is given a mythological perspective on the situation. It's a much broader process than he was aware of. So sometimes we see dreams like that just have a purely archetypal quality about them, and there isn't much personal about them. That was the dream you wanted me to talk about.
Because
I've plenty more, but
could you say in your opinion then, because he follows a girl.
yes,
so
yeah, it was a man's dream, so it's the feminine in the man, which is being reconstituted. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so that's why we are talking about different levels of the unconscious, right? And all
Yes.
these characters in the dream. So that's why I thought that this dream had the level of the complex, let's say, because he's following a girl, and the dismembered is of the girl, right?
Yes. And sometimes you see the complex directly in a dream. For example, I remember a dream in which a woman is being chased, and when she looks around, she sees that she's being chased by the head of her mother, just not the body, just the head. And instead of hair, the mother's head is covered in snakes. Okay. And it's an absolutely terrifying image. And she thinks of the Medusa or the Gorgon of Greek mythology, which turned people to stone. And this was this woman's experience of her mother, that her mother terrified her and would petrify her. So this is a straight archetypal representation of the mother complex. Occasionally we see that kind of imagery as well. Usually it's not quite so easy to interpret.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem with dream work. Sometimes it's deeply mysterious.
So, and Lionel, also but because I think it's useful for people, and also it's starting to answer a little bit of the question that was put in the WhatsApp. We can go further in another meeting, as I said. But in your book, The Psyche and the Sacred, then, and since you talked about this dream of the Medusa and the mother complex, in your words, you say here, the archetype of mother corresponds to a deep structure in the psyche. Okay, we know that, right? While the mothering style of the individual woman or society supplies its conscious manifestation. Because the question that people put to us in the WhatsApp, sent to Fabrizio, and he put to us in the WhatsApp group.
I didn't look, sorry, yes, go ahead.
Okay, it's about this this changing in society where men take supposedly feminine roles in the past and vice versa. So if that's changing, then deep in the unconscious, the archetypes could be changing. That's what I can remember of the.
Yeah. Well, the way, what I think is changing is the way the archetype expresses itself. So there's always been mothering. That's an archetype. Obviously, there's always been mothering, but different cultures and different periods of history will mother in different ways. But it's the same archetype. It's just that the culture affects the expression of the archetype. So I think the expression of the archetype is evolving or changing.
Yeah, that's the question that the person made.
But it's the same archetype. I mean, if you dream of a food truck, that you could easily associate that to the mother archetype because it brings nourishment. It doesn't look anything like a mother, but it's archetypally connected to nourishment. So that would be, but you wouldn't have gotten that, in the past. So that's just a new expression of the archetype. So it's just the expression is a function of different cultures.
Yeah, I think that's very important to clarify, Lana, because I think people make a lot of confusion in this sense, and especially nowadays that the roles seem to be fluid, I don't know, changing a lot, the roles of the masculine and feminine. But I think it's important what you said is the expression of the archetype that changes with the culture and times, right?
Yeah, yeah. Some archetypes are not expressed in some cultures. For example, in our culture, we don't have the archetype of initiation is not very important. In pre-technological tribal cultures, the archetype of initiation is used to move people from being a boy into a man or a girl into a woman. There's a big complex ritual process that expresses that archetype. In our culture, we don't have that very much. You may have first communion or a bar mitzvah or getting your first driver's license or something, but we don't really have initiation ceremonies. So that would be an example of an archetype that's hardly expressed in our culture. So there is a cultural factor that's important.
Okay, so should we open to questions now?
Sure, yeah.
And I think, today we can go on recording, but next meeting, I just want to tell people, next meeting, I'm thinking not only talking about Spiritist psychologist point of view about the dreams. There are a lot of interesting questions that arise. I'm not going to give spoilers, but anyway, and I thought of next meeting, and then after we discuss, then we stop recording, because then I thought that people, we hear people that are here every couple of weeks, and that will be here in that meeting can bring some of their own dreams. Not that we are going to interpret or whatever, but we can, if people feel comfortable, bring dreams, and we can talk a little bit about the archetypes, for instance, that appear in the dream, or something, maybe some numinous quality, okay? And then I think next meeting, we will stop recording. I just want to say that, because for people that are going to listen to this meeting later on, they can see if they want to participate or not. But then we are going to stop recording the discussion and questions, all right? So I think we have Sylvia and then Jussara. I'm not sure she wants to make a question or was just saying,
no question, just
okay, okay. So Sylvia, go ahead.
I'd like to ask a question, actually, to both of you. Thank you so much so far. It's been extremely interesting. It's about the prophetic dreams. I mean, not necessarily something that happens exactly the way you dream it, but is very, very similar to what one dreams and actually happens. Can you talk a little bit about this kind of dreams? Is it possible?
Well, the problem, there is such a thing as a prophetic dream. The difficulty is that when it's happening, you don't know whether it's referring to something that will happen or not. You can only sort of say that when you look back on the dream.
And you see something.
Because then you realize, but there seem to be realms of the psyche which are outside of time and space as we know it, that know what's going to happen in the future. But you only see that when you look back. It's difficult. You can't look at a dream and say, oh, it's predicting the future. Yeah. We just can't do that.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Niall.
Actually, at this point, I'm reading at this moment, I'm reading a book, Aniela Jaffe's book. I think the title in English, because it's translated to Portuguese, the title in English would be Jung's Last Years. You know that? You know this book?
I don't think I've read that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and she's talking about here in this chapter about synchronistic phenomenon and about extrasensorial perceptions. She says for Jung, all synchronistic phenomena would be related or would be caused by extrasensorial perceptions. And exactly what Lionel said, that I think we can think of your image of the ocean, and that in these depths of the psyche, out of space and time, right? Where synchronistic phenomena occur or come rising to the consciousness, and that would have this quality of linking by meaning, like the consciousness and the depths of the unconscious. And exactly that, because you don't know that it's prophetic until it happens in the future, for instance. But they would have a connection. But she's connecting to extrasensorial perceptions, Lionel.
I think that's very important. Another important thing that I didn't mention, which is perhaps relevant, is that there's a very ancient tradition of dreams sent by God or by the gods in pre-Christian times. And certainly in the Bible, there are many important dreams. You know, Joseph is warned that Herod is coming to kill the children in a dream. He's and so on. There's several very important dreams in the Bible. But what happened? And so it was understood that dreams could have that kind of spiritual significance. Didn't he also have a dream that Mary is conceived by the Holy Spirit, also in a dream? But what happened was, in the end of the 4th century, when St. Jerome was translating the Bible, it was about 380 or 390. While he was working, he had a dream in which he was accused of reading pagan authors like Cicero, and he was taken before a heavenly court and reprimanded for reading these pagan authors. And so when he got to the place in Leviticus where it says that you mustn't try to interpret oracles, instead of translating it that way, he wrote down, you mustn't interpret dreams. And so the whole tradition of dreams sent by God went out of Christianity at the end of the 4th century because of St. Jerome's mischief. It was very naughty of him. But before that, they were recognized to have spiritual significance. And there's a nice book on that by John Sanford. It's called Dreams, God's Forgotten Language, where he tries to bring back the spiritual importance of dreams.
What's the name of the author?
John Sanford, S-A-N-F-O-R-D.
Sanford. Okay.
I don't know if it's still in press. It's kind of an old book. It might be.
Okay, I'll try to find it. It's interesting. I asked that question actually because I remember at least, there were more, but at least 2 dreams that I had that actually came through. One didn't take too long to happen and it scared me. And the other one, actually, looking back now, and that I think I was a teenager. I remember being in one place, in a part of a town, looking up and seeing this building being burned, like, and now I think of the image of the 2 towers. It was a long, long time ago, and I had lots of children with me, and I started picking up the children, holding them, and tried to keep them safe, because I could see that building that was being destroyed, like falling apart. And then I was a teenager at the time, and just now thinking about dreams and everything, I associate the image with the tower, because for something, it wasn't exactly like the tower, but it was a tall building that you could see them above all the other buildings, if you see what I mean, and that's sort of coming down. And thinking about dreams and doing this, and I associated the image that I had, I think when I was 14 years old, having the dream like that.
Yeah, the problem with a dream like that is you couldn't possibly know that it refers to something in the future.
No.
You'd have to work on it. You'd have to say, well, what kind of building was it? Because a building in a dream always represents a structure in the psyche. So if you knew what kind of building it was, you would know what the mental structure is that's being burned. And then fire would represent symbolically passion, destruction, excitement, energy, all those things, then you try and apply it to whatever that building means to you.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that was thinking back that was very powerful was the need that I felt, the fear for the children, because it's like I was a teacher or something, and I was trying to get all the children, picking them up and trying to keep them safe, you know, for something that was happening. But you know, it's just
Yeah,
an
well, the
image.
children in dreams often represent either young parts of the personality that we all have, or parts of the personality that represent the future, the potential for growth in the person. That may have been what you were trying to protect. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's the way I would look at it symbolically.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So more questions. We still have like 10 minutes. Do we have any more questions? Comments?
I have a comment, if I may, if nobody else wants to say. It's just something that Lionel said about the dream, that you continue to dream. And you know, it's a long time ago, but I remember I had this dream and I woke up because of some noise or something. And I wanted to see what it was in the end, you know, how it came out. And I was just saying, no, I have to go back and I have to think about this. And I actually went through, and I was awake already, but with my eyes closed and focusing it. And I saw the end of the dream because I wanted to see the end when it sort of broke up in the middle. But I never thought that that would have this special meaning or anything. That, you know, there was a name for that, to continue dreaming.
But assuming that everything has a meaning.
Thank you, Sylvia. I don't know if somebody else wants to make a research.
Yeah, it's one thing you haven't come up is the modified dreams, where you plan the dream ahead. When you've had something bad happen to you and you try and modify it to get out of it.
When you are in the dream,
when you're awake, when a lucid dream, when you can control the way the dream.
You can control the dream, but you know,
those are called lucid.
And you're trying to get out of it, type of thing.
Those are called lucid dreams, and they're quite rare, but some people can do it. I have never been able to do that. I don't know much about those dreams because I haven't experienced them myself. Have you had a lucid dream like that where you're aware that you're dreaming in the dream?
Yeah, because something happened and you were trying to get away from something. Sometimes it goes back, sometimes it doesn't.
Well, you'd have to look at what it was you were trying to get away from, and the dream is about, you know. I don't know.
I can't tell you, Lionel and Richard, in my own experience, I know that some religions, for instance, Buddhism, they practice some lines of Buddhism, lucid dreams, right?
Yeah, the Tibetans do.
Tibetans, yes. And I remember, because I used to be, before my practice, okay, many years ago, in Jungian analysis, I used to be Freudian, okay, here in my medical school, psychiatry was very Freudian. So I'll give you an example. And then I started, we do, I don't know how we call, I don't know, when we start training to be an analyst. So we have an analyst, but it's not an analysis like regular, is to practice to be an analyst. How do you call that in English, Lionel?
All right, when you're practicing, when you're training,
when you start your when you are a candidate, you are learning
Student.
to be an
Yeah.
analyst, then you have to go through your own analysis,
training
but it's
analysis,
not a regular analysis. What's the name?
a training analysis.
Training, yes, thank
Yeah.
you. It's training analysis.
Yeah.
And I was very Freudian. Like the examples the Lionel gave, everything was a phallus, everything was repressed sexuality and things like that.
Yeah.
So to pay attention to the dreams, and even Freudians, because of the psychoanalyst, Freud at certain point stopped analyzing dreams, right, Lana?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he thought the psychoanalysis in itself, laying down and just free association and the analyst giving you interpretations would be okay. So he stopped analyzing dreams. So I started my training analysis, okay? And I had this dream that actually is mixing everything. Think about this now. It was kind of also, Sylvia, prophetic dream. I will tell you. And now I realize that. But I had this dream, and okay, because my analyst said, oh, and you in the dream, he was trying to teach me how to connect to the images of the dreams, because I didn't even have the idea. I was totally Freudian. So he said, well, just pay attention. And if you are in the dream, he said like this, because of course he knew me by now and my extroverted feeling function. So he said, you can play in the dream. You can play in the dream. So I dreamt, for me, it was a huge change of perspective in life and in my profession, to go from Freudian to Jungian, it was, wow, you had to deconstruct a lot of stuff in your head, right, Lionel?
You have to go to confession, I think.
Yeah, totally. So I had this dream that I was in an airport. I never told you that, Lionel. So I'm going to say in the air, a lot of people will know about that. So I dreamt that I was in an airport, waiting for my luggage. And then I saw a colleague with his wife. This colleague had done a lot of research in my medical training years with me in psychiatry, okay, in the residency of psychiatry. And I was trying, I don't want to look that, he's very Freudian. And I was trying to hide, I don't want to look at him. And it's many, many years ago, so I'm trying to remember, because some things are lost. It was not an initial dream, I think, but it's a dream that I think it's interesting now to tell you about. And then I think my luggage, I think he and his wife got my luggage, and I said, well, I have to talk to him because that luggage is mine. Okay. And I talked to him and this and that. And at the same time, I think when I was trying to decide if I was going to talk to him or go on hiding or something like that, I think I talked to him, and this is my luggage, hello, this and that. But then I looked at some point in the airport, and there was this TV, filming something with a reporter or whatever. And I didn't give much attention. That for me, it was something really amazing that I didn't give it. And then I remember, the name of my analyst. So my analyst told me that I can play. And then at that moment, I became conscious in the dream. It's kind of rare for me, but I remember that this happened. So what I did, I want to play. So I started, and I didn't pay attention to the TV and the reporter. And how this elastic bat or whatever that I think you call in English, it's like I found one or something, and I start jumping. and going up and down and up and down. And then I could hear my breathing up and down, up and down. And that was cool. And then the dream ended.
I think
So
you mean
it's just-
trampoline.
Sorry?
I think you mean a trampoline
Well, but it's like
that
children.
jumps.
Yeah,
Yes, it's for
it's a-
the children up and down. Yeah,
you call trampoline? Yeah,
trampoline.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was, so there was all this breathing stuff and going up and down. And I say that it's kind of prophetic because I'm not going to give you specifics, but this colleague is giving me a hard time lately, you know, because he's pretty much against spirituality and all this stuff. And I bring in my hometown and in my state a lot of research about spirituality and mental health. And in a sense, maybe it was a prophetic or whatever, or not prophetic, but, you know, like connected, because this is decades, I think, you know, like maybe 20 years ago. But, well, there you are, you have, in a sense that you get, for me, it was very interesting to get conscious in a dream and decided if I wanted, and decide if I want to do what, to go on hiding or to play. Would you like to say anything about that?
No, I'm not
Since
sure
you're
what the
sharing.
trampoline means. I'm not sure what this bouncing up and down means, actually. I mean, I think the baggage is very interesting because baggage always means emotional baggage, you know, stuff that you carry with you from the past. So the Freudians were carrying that for you.
Yeah.
But I don't know what and the airport obviously means you're going to go somewhere or you've just been somewhere. But I don't know what the trampoline means. Did it have a personal meaning to you, that jumping up and down?
Well, actually, the breathing, I woke up with a very good feeling
Oh,
and listening to my own breathing. So I can tell you that my analyst and I went a lot in this breathing stuff and the going up and down as a playing thing. Because as a child, for instance, I'd love to go in the swing, you know,
yeah.
go up and down. But that it's another way of going up and down. But it was interesting because the breathing was, you know, filling my lungs with air. I think I was constricted by the Freudian stuff. I had been for many years.
Yeah. Well, breath always has to do with spirit.
Yeah.
Spirit, yeah.
We thought something around that.
So maybe your spirit had become freed up by playing, something like that.
And also the TV and the journalist, and I'm not paying attention to them, was something interesting because it's like the collective, you know, don't bother me anymore or something like that. I think Jussara wants to say something.
Well, considering it like a prophetic dream, I would say that maybe now you can get a very good advice of, you know, before this kind of situation that you're saying you're going through it, this hardship with this colleague, that you have to remember to breathe in, breathe out, just you know, play with the situation, be joyful like you were, and at the same time knowing that you are doing what you're doing not because of the notoriety, because you don't care whether there is people watching or applauding you or not. You're just doing that because this is what feels good and what fulfills you. I mean, that's my my 2 cents contribution.
Thank you. Thank you for your interpretation. And for everyone, Jussara and I and Marcia also are doing a lot of work in Joanna de Angelis, right? Studies and podcasts and things like that. We can put also in the chat if you'd like, Jussara, please, the references to our podcast I think people would enjoy that. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
if Marcia
and
can do that. Yes, and
Yeah.
actually, right, Anahy, I just wrote to Anahy this morning that I had a dream with her and you, Lionel, this past night, that we were in a circle talking. I have no idea what we were talking. We were talking about, but it was quite a nice conversation. So I don't know.
That was a house call.
Yeah, and the circle, it's interesting. I think Sylvia, one more last question, because I think we are out of time.
Okay, no, I was just saying something. You probably know about a tribe in Samoa, that they have a custom that every morning, everybody in the village wake up and they go to the center and they tell each other their dreams. Have you heard of them?
I've
This
heard of
tribe
them,
in the
yeah.
Samoa, and I know someone who did some research and worked with them and said that they are the most calm, tranquil people in the planet. But every morning, everybody comes before they do anything and they tell each other their dreams. That should be interesting to create a group of people to tell dreams to. But he said they are so stable mentally and, really don't have any hangs up, because everything they tell each other, so everybody knows their innermost. It's fun.
The best
Just
I remember,
curious.
about that group was they didn't try to analyze the dreams. They just retold the
just tell.
dreams. Yeah, they just tell the dreams.
They just
Yeah.
tell the dreams. Yes. They
Yeah.
don't have that sophisticated, but it's
So-
something
so
that
it's-
helps them.
Yeah, well, I took from that it's important to just have a friend or a spouse that you can just tell your dream to in the morning. Just, you don't have to analyze it. Just, I don't understand the mechanisms of it, but it seems to work for them.
Yeah, we have a process at Pacifica where we just sit in a circle. It's called social dreaming, and everybody just tells a dream without any analysis. It's quite interesting, actually,
Mm-hmm.
to hear them.
Well, I think we are on time. I just wanted to tell you people that I'm going to the US, to the USA, to work with Marcia. You can put in the chat also, Marcia, the event in Portland. I know I'm not in social media, I'm sorry, because I don't know if people already know the exchanges of the events, but I'm going to Portland to work with Joanna and Marcia in a beautiful event in Portland. And I was looking to our schedule, and in October, okay, we are supposed to have 3 meetings. But the one in the 1st of October, I will be flying back to Brazil, so it's not going to be possible. But we are okay with the themes, with our schedule, so there's not going to be any problem. So our next meeting will be in the 15th of October. We have 2 meetings in October, then, and in the 15th. And in the 29th, okay?
Sorry, so you won't be here on the 1st, because we should be having a meeting on the 1st of October. So you're missing that, and you're also meeting the following week, which is the 8th. So the next meeting that we are having is going to be on the 15th.
Yeah, just
3
so
weeks
that,
from now.
yeah, it
4 weeks,
doesn't
actually.
mix up, because we were not scheduled for the 8th, so I just didn't want to move. People are already scheduled, so
Okay.
and it's okay, because then we have 2 meetings in October, exactly, Sylvia, in the
Okay.
15th and in
And
the 29th.
29th.
And in
Okay.
the 15th, we are going to be going on with this wonderful subject. We are going to see what Spiritist psychology and Joanna de Angelis have to say about dreams. And then it's that thing that we talked about. If you want to bring some dreams, we want to talk, as we talked about that dream of mine, it would be great. And then we are not going to record this part, okay? So I'll see you in the 15th of October, or if anyone is in Portland with us, we can meet there and hug personally. Brazilians love to hug, so then we can hug. Lionel knows that. And we can see each other, okay? And dream a lot, and nice dreams to everyone. I'll see you in the 15th of October.